after not good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm still used to doing my classes where I usually start with good afternoon, everyone, and they all reply to me. That's neither here nor there. I want to say good morning to Dr. Jim Ronald. Thank you for coming around, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It really is an honor.
Oh, well, it's an honor to be in your presence. We were going to do this actually in your house.
Yes, that was the plan. Yeah.
That was the plan. And you were going to take us to an okonomiyaki shop, and I was looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's right. We'll do that. Let's do that. We'll do that another time.
I would
don't need to be doing this.
I would like that.
Do the social bit another time.
I would either Osaka or Hiroshima. I heard that, and I've never had it, but okonomiyaki is the thing in those two towns.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. How long have you been in Hiroshima?
35 years ago, I first came to Hiroshima. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was born here, as you can tell. Yeah.
No,
I was 27.
You were 27. Yeah. So was I actually. I was well, no, I was 20. No, I was 28 when I came to Japan. But you've got me beat. What brought you to Japan then?
A 1-year adventure in an exotic country after being a furita for 5 years. Furita is Jocelyn is someone who doesn't have a full-time job and goes from part-time job to part-time job or temporary job.
That still doesn't tell me why I ended up in Japan, though. So you were looking to
because because I was born in Australia, I did try to get a job working in France or Italy since I'd studied French and Italian, but not being a European, it was not easy to get a job. On the other hand, when I was 27, a friend saw in an Australianers magazine in London, Australian English teacher wanted for Japan because of the working holiday visa. And she said, you keep saying you want to go somewhere, why not Japan? And I had the interview and it was in Hiroshima. And I arrived thinking it would still be very radioactive and I was really nervous.
So you didn't, when you say that, oh, I was wondering if it was going to be radioactive, then that means that you basically didn't know a lot about your destination?
No, and I remember, I mean, I don't know how, I remember, you have kind of two totally divergent images of Japan pre-internet, and, one is, samurai, ninja, kimono, the other is high tech. You think those two things don't go together, and you arrive, not one, and you arrive kind of expecting exoticness. And when a student asked me just recently, what surprised you most? I said, it wasn't the exoticness. We could meet and talk, and there wasn't that big gap. And that's what made me kind of fall over backwards, that you could make relationships, and we used language in such a similar way. And it was maybe a similar way to shy, retiring British, uptight people.
When you came to Japan, was your plan to stay more than a year, or just a year and then back off to another?
It was just going to be a year. I didn't imagine that it would be more. It might have been a 2-year contract. I can't remember now, but I didn't imagine that I'd have a reason, because when all your family and friends are thousands of miles away, you think, well, I'll go there. And I mean, not many of the people gathered here are that young. But when we arrived here, there was no internet. And a 5-minute conversation home would be 1,000 yen.
Yes.
And so you really did feel the distance. And so I didn't imagine that I would, but
Then what made you stay?
Well, I think within a month, I kind of fell in love with being here and finding that teaching Japanese people was I felt that was like what I was born to be doing. Within 4 months, I'd had a nervous breakdown and gone back to England because I couldn't cope with all this. The idea that if I'm going to be here all my life, I'm going to be separated from my family all my life and my friends. And how can I cope with this? It's like I was being torn in half, and I'd be writing letters back home thinking it's a lie because I don't know. I think this is where I'm going to be. So it was very traumatic, but looking back, I don't regret it, of course. Yeah.
So you're saying that at a 4-month point, you were kind of like traumatized and were kind of torn about staying or not?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there were many things that kind of, I think maybe I had a nervous breakdown in me waiting to happen sometime, and this kind of provoked it. And I remember when I went back to England, I met my friends from college, because I didn't get depressed or anything. I just went crazy for a few days. And when I went back to England and I was chatting with my friends from college, someone who was my roommate for 4 years said, "Jim, can I ask one thing? You know, when you went crazy, how did anyone notice the difference?" I thought, thanks, you know me.
So you spend a bit of time back home kind of recuperating.
Yeah, I spent 1 year.
mentally.
Yeah, that's right. And getting restored and replenished. And
you came back for more.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You wanted to treat yourself to that whole experience yet again.
My sister was really saying, look what Japan did to you. And I knew it wasn't that simple. And I appreciated her love and concern, but I knew that it wasn't, Japan didn't cause the nervous breakdown in a way. It was, I had to go through that.
As you were recuperating, then you were thinking about coming back to Japan, renewing your love affair with the country and the contract perhaps, and basically just getting to know the country deeper then. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And part of this nervous breakdown was that I also became a Christian at that time. And that kind of meant that coming back, I wasn't coming back alone. And that felt like a big difference to me.
I want to ask about all of that background stuff. I'm actually, thank you for revealing the bit about the 4 months in kind of crisis that you had, because that's really brave of you. I didn't know that. Did that play a part, or what part did your career play until you started sort of moving into the area of pragmatics, which is, I think, a lot of what we're going to end up talking about today, and what I'm most interested in.
Okay, not what I've got planned, but that's fine.
No, whatever you got planned.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think I hadn't heard of pragmatics, and the fact that the kind of feeling of the lack of distance with Japanese speakers of English, I couldn't speak much Japanese when I arrived, was kind of indication that much of the pragmatics was in common. And that, for example, I'd say to someone, would you like to go for lunch after this? And they say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm busy. I think, oh, okay, she doesn't like me. I didn't realize that there was a pragmatic difference, that in Japanese, you typically, a refusal is, you give a kind of fuzzy reason. You don't say, I have to talk to a colleague or something. And so I would just interpret it according to my own terms. So that was a kind of typically pragmatic difference that I didn't know about. So I just kind of assumed that's what stereotypes and things are based on. We're thinking they're communicating like this, so they're rude, they're thoughtless, they're careless, whatever, when often it's just that's how you typically respond to an invitation or whatever in that culture. So those pragmatics, from the beginning, but I didn't realize. I just thought people didn't like me.
So it was your classroom experiences that kind of led you up to or move into researching those differences and how to address them, or did somebody introduce you to pragmatics?
It wasn't until I did my master's degree at Birmingham University that we actually didn't even have a course called pragmatics, but it was discourse, but it was a lot of pragmatics was in there. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And it wasn't a major focus for the studies or for my dissertation. But when I went back, when I started at a university, I was given a seminar class to teach. And I thought, oh, sociolinguistics will be good. And then that was the first semester, was mostly like variation, like differences according to age and area and gender. And then the second part, I came across George Yule's Introduction to Pragmatics, which is a very simple book, but really good. But it's kind of teaching about pragmatics as an academic subject. But then I found it shouldn't be here. It should be in my first year speaking classes. And I wanted to be bringing down that information, that knowledge from there to my classes. And that's how it kind of developed.
Then, okay, so at what, well, you got your master's degree at what point in your career? Like a few years after you came back to Japan?
Yeah, it was, I suppose I spent about 4 years at Hiroshima YMCA. A friend told me about this. It was a sandwich MA, which meant you'd have 9 months in the UK, then 3 months, no, 9 months in Japan, then 3 months in the UK, 9 months back in Japan, 3 months in the UK, except after the first 9 months, we just stayed in the UK for the rest of it.
Okay.
And so it was, yeah, a friend said, yeah, are you interested? And I hadn't even really thought of it. But once you'd been working in a kind of large language school, you reach a kind of, just by the process of being there and other people going back to their countries, you become a senior teacher. So you're meant to be helping making tests or helping new teachers. And I realized I wasn't really equipped to do that. And so that was why I thought I needed a master's would be useful.
So as you were sort of being introduced to this wider world and thinking about doing your master's, you were actually in language school.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And even at that time, a friend was leaving a local university. She said, "Oh, do you want to come and work where I am? Because I'm leaving, there'll be a vacancy." And things were fairly easy at that time. And I thought, why would I want to be teaching large classes of unmotivated students when I have classes? A big class at the YMCA was 10 people who were paying with their money to come to the class. I thought, isn't this? But then once you get married and have children, you kind of resent that all your teaching is every evening and Saturday. And so that's a kind of reason for wanting to, thinking, okay, maybe there is a plus side to teaching at university. And then thankfully I got a job in the English department of the largest local private university, which means that my students are relatively motivated and also, fairly good. And yeah, so what, and the classes are not too big. Yeah.
So I thought you and I were going to be talking about the questions that we set up within the framework of pragmatics, because it seemed to me this is about pragmatics, getting to know each other, getting to know your students well, getting them to know themselves well enough so that they can relate to each other and to their teacher and to their studies in the best way possible. But
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Is that sort of subset? Is that under
that's it in what I had planned? Yeah.
Okay.
So, shall I give an illustration?
Sure. Why don't we get started on that?
It was about 4 years ago that I was on my way to work, and it was maybe the end of March, and I thought, my students don't know how to sit next to each other. And I thought, and that came to me. I thought, oh, okay, then what's involved in sitting next to a new classmate? And so I sort of worked it through, and then on that first day, students naturally don't sit next to anyone. But once half the students on the register had come in, the following students, I said, oh, can you sit next to someone? And they'd sort of move to slide into the chair next to someone. I'd say, stop. I'd say, what do you say? And they say, anyone? And someone might say, can I sit here? Is this seat free? I said, oh, great, that's good. Okay, and then they say, can I sit? Yeah. And I said to the other person, how do you reply? They say, yes. What else? More. We need more. They say, yeah, sure. What about some gestures? And so, because in fact, this is not sitting next to someone on the bus. You're not going to be having 4 years next to that person on the bus. They probably won't become your best friend or even your partner for life. But at university, all of these things are likely or possible. And so it's a kind of high stakes thing that was totally ignored. And so I do it, and then so each poor student comes in. The others are there that they can do I can elicit very quickly because they've all seen the first one, the second one, the third one.
Right.
Until you see a student. And so the ones who are sitting down, they're ready. And I remember, I think the first year I did it, one student said something like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And it was a smile that could kind of melt the other person. I thought, and that was 4 years ago. I remember his smile. I thought, that is what you want to do. You want to say to your classmate, you're welcome. And because it means, is this seat free? Means I want to sit next to you. And the response should be, I'm really glad you want to sit next to me. I want you to sit next to me too. So it's a high stakes thing that we spend decades ignoring. And then once you're finished, the next class will say, okay, we'll do this again. And they do it. And they think, oh, it's, yeah. And I say, how do you continue the conversation? Well, I probably typically do it as a role play. So I put 2 desks at the front. Is this seat free? Yeah. And then we spend about 10 or 15 seconds awkwardly silent. I say, okay, what do we say? And I ask the students to stand up, and then I say, give me an idea. How would we naturally continue the conversation? And someone will say, oh, have you got a textbook? Or hi, I'm Jose. So they would propose various ways that you could go from avoid that silence. So it's not really a positive way. You don't want that awkward silence. Yeah.
Go ahead. Don't keep going.
And yeah, related to that was, I think from the first class, I'd say, I just want to introduce one rule for our class, and I want you to keep this rule. And that is, from the time you enter the classroom, you put your phone in your bag. Because if you're looking at your phone, people won't talk to you. That's your private space. And I was reminded of the importance of that at the PANSIC conference 2 or 3 weeks ago. I joined the kind of forum where Chiuki was speaking, and there was one person whose role was to welcome people as they came in, and she did it really well. I looked in, and someone said, hi, come on in. I went and sat just near her, and I was going to ask something, and she was looking at her phone. I thought, oh, okay, I can't disturb her. And so when she put down the phone, I told her this story. She said, oh, okay. And so that before the class even starts, obviously they will talk to each other in Japanese, but that's really important. I want them to become friends. I don't want everything to have to be done through English. I want them to be comfortable together. And so these things, even before excuse me, is this seat free, is part of it happens, before the bell has gone for the beginning of class. They're coming in and they're thinking, what's this? It's not like high school. And I hope it's not. I hope it's going to be very different. And I hope it's going to be exciting. And that the main excitement will be interaction with classmates, not me performing in the front. That I may need to model things, but I want them to make friends with each other. And I want them to appreciate each other. And if I can give one example of just, sometimes students forget their textbook, and that's another opportunity. I said, what can you say in this case? And someone might say, oh, I forgot my textbook. Or how can you do it without saying anything? And they look in their bag and so, until someone gets the hint. And one student said, excuse me, is that textbook free? And he was joking, taking these words and applying it. And I thought, really nice. You're making a really nice joke in English. That's pragmatic competence. You've become advanced. You can feel comfortable to do that. And the classmates laugh because it's a shared incident. And So you can see once you get me started, I can keep talking about pragmatics in the classroom.
Believe it or not, that's what you're here for. So just
okay.
roll with it, buddy. But I did want to ask, but okay, before I ask the question I wanted to ask, I should probably just get a couple of technical things out of the way. Thank you very much. We've got a really healthy crowd for you here, Jim. I think something in the order of basically 10 people are here to come in and listen to you speak. Now, for those of you who came, thank you very much. I'm sure Jim is very happy that you're here.
Yes,
I have everyone pretty much muted until Jim and I get through most of the bulk of the things that we wanted to get through in the conversation. If you have a question to ask, please feel free to write it in the chat, or if you really need to ask it by voice, please feel free to raise your hand using the reactions button, to use the raise hand button there. Then I'll know that there's something that you're really itching to ask. However, you can always write it in chat, and I will also say this to the people who are watching us live on Facebook through the OTJ group. If you use the comment field inside the live stream, I will try to get those comments, those questions up to Jim, and he can answer them as we're speaking here. So please feel free to use that facility, and then maybe later I'll open up all the microphones and we can have a bit of a free-for-all, more people talking to each other. So Jim, one thing I wanted to ask you about, just such a fascinating thing when we get to, or I hope to someday maybe, to be able to take advantage of these things that you're mentioning, get to your level of ability to see these moments in the classroom that are so teachable. Oh, he forgot his textbook. Hey, everybody, let's take a look at this and let's see if we can work out a little mini conversation. In your case, do you have a textbook that's specifically for that, or do you teach from what we would consider, a basic, an English conversation textbook, or whatever textbook that you have, and then you have this wealth of experience that you draw from, and you see a moment, and you drop it right in there, move the textbook aside for a few minutes, and go straight to it? How do you approach looking at those moments and saying, oh, wait, but we got to do the textbook. Oh, but wait, that's a really good teachable moment. How do you balance all of that out when you're doing this approach?
I'm just kind of feeling a bit of homogoroshi, as you would say. My wealth of experience, I don't think I can live up to that. But as I said, it took me maybe 30 years of teaching before I realized the students didn't know how to sit next to each other. So it's not really me catching every teachable moment. So many have flowed by, and I didn't realize, and I didn't notice. And I mean, regarding that, I had one really good student, an amazing student who graduated about 3 years ago. He spent a year in Arizona State University as an exchange student. And he was the kind of student who you'd kind of dream to have in a class. And he would have classmates who would say, we don't get to discuss things enough. He said, okay, well, we'll do it. We don't need a teacher. So he was and when I told him about this sitting next to someone, he said to me, when I was at ASU, I joined a lecture and I just slid into the next person. I felt it was wrong. I felt the uncomfortableness, but I thought you didn't know either. I was kind of relieved that this model student also could have done with kind of being made aware of it. I don't know if it's teaching it. You kind of become aware of what you could do and how you can do it better. And one student, because I have a lot of end of class feedback, the students, since we went online, the students in my first year class write a lot on Google, a shared Google Doc after every class. And one student regarding that particular thing said, I realized that language and culture are so close. And I think in our country, we wouldn't usually speak to the person next to us. And of course, I mean, it's with these things that I respond to maybe I'll show some of that later, but I respond to each of their comments on the class and I say, yeah, you're right. But it's also true that each person has a choice how they use language. We don't have to be the same as other people. So that maybe in Hiroshima, I can say, try to be a bit more like people from Osaka, a bit more outgoing, a bit more friendly. And because I think in Hiroshima, there tends to be a kind of more introverted country town insecurity that's is part of the things that you're dealing with in the classroom too. I've forgotten what your question was, but I hope I'm not missing
No,
it.
that's basically how do
You've
you
forgotten too.
was it no I think that was a good example. Okay, so for example, let's say you're going through a textbook, right? And okay, first, that textbook, did you choose it because it makes it easy for you to like put it aside for a second and say, hey, there's an interesting moment, everyone, let's look at what Taro and Koyuki just did, and let's do something with that. Is it easy? Do you choose a textbook specifically for that, or do you choose a textbook specifically because it teaches that stuff? Because it seems to me that there are all these teachable moments that probably I, without your experience, have just sort of let pass. But you now, with your 30 years or so of experience, can say, hey, there's a moment right there. How do you handle that with the balance of the need to get through the textbook so you can get to the assessment? How does that all fit in for you?
This particular first year course, we started, this is, I think, the 5th year. And for 4 years, we were using, afraid I can't remember the author's name just now. Nice talking with you. It has a lot of pragmatics in it, and it's fairly light. And we only switched because we'd been using it for 4 years. Now we're using another one, which is kind of mainstream, solid book. And but I think either the pragmatics is there, or if it isn't there, it's there. Like, how can we make this conversation better? I mean, that's something with like Pilgrim's background activities is you look at the textbook conversation, how can we make it better? It's so stiff and awkward. Or it finishes after 5 turns. So that's the start for your conversation, add some more. So there are things that, in a way, it doesn't matter too much whether it's a textbook that has plenty of pragmatics or is lacking plenty of pragmatics. But they both offer opportunities. And as for those teachable moments, I think we're as likely to catch it here as we are in the classroom sometimes. I remember the first presentation I went to about pragmatics, which was taught by Carol Rinnert, who is pragmatic sick person. She's a friend and neighbor, and she was talking about conversational style. And she was saying that, what she was, for example, New Yorkers and people in, here we are.
Yepper.
Yeah, she's probably there somewhere. I'm not sure. But
I'm not sure she'll be going to the About Us, but I just wanted to tell everyone about the Joel. You mentioned the Joel pragmatism, but keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so she was talking about conversational style, about how New Yorkers and people, say, from Alabama, will speak in a very different way. So that if they're in New York, they would value quick responses, even overlapping, and that would be a good conversation. Whereas in American South, it's slow and respectful, and that's called a bowling style, and the other one's called baseball style, basketball style. And when I saw her explaining that in a JOLT meeting, I thought that's a classroom activity. Because if you're thinking of where is the Japanese English classroom, it's beyond the bowling. It's beyond slower and turn by turn, more than anything else. Which means that anywhere else they're going to encounter is going to be very challenging. There won't be my turn may not come if there are 3 people, 4 people talking. It's like my turn didn't come.
Yeah.
You have to grab the turn, and you have to, and so seeing that, I thought that's a classroom activity. So I made this kind of 1 minute non-stop, no silence conversations, so that they can feel the excitement of that and get practice in doing that. So as I said, you're as likely to find it here now, or sometimes talking with people or whatever, as in the classroom when the student forgets their textbook and you think, oh, that's an opportunity. And I think that the kind of, just in the last year or two, rather than pragmatics, I think I've been thinking about I want my students to think I'm not just an English learner, I'm an English user.
Right.
And so each of these opportunities, when they sit next to a classmate, they've become an English user. When they ask a classmate to share the textbook, they become an English user. And they're thinking each time, they're thinking about, how do I do it well? So how do I say, can I share the textbook? Can I say it? Or do I need to just kind of give hints and hope they pick it up? So the kind of, to become an English user is a kind of an empowering thing, I think, for them. It's not, I've been an English learner for 8 years before I entered university. And I think that that's kind of part, and the pragmatics is within that, how to be able to do it in a way that doesn't cause, that is comfortable, doesn't cause offense, and that kind of gives me agency. I can say no, I can make suggestions to the teacher.
You're wearing pants.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay, someone.
No, it was, I know who it was. I just don't want to say the name, so it's okay.
That's okay. It could be a pragmatic opportunity.
It was a very pragmatic opportunity, yeah.
Thank you for your contribution. I really appreciate it.
What was I going to say? So how do students feel about, like, probably there aren't a lot of teachers that will very directly, specifically talk about, well, let's improve this dialogue. Well, how do you feel about it? Oh, hey, everyone, did you just see what happened between those two? Let's take a moment and explore that. How do your students feel about this sort of interesting take that you have on their English language classes that veer sometimes from what they think is like, well, this is about vocabulary study, this is about grammar study, isn't it? How do they feel about your particular focus on the pragmatics of language learning?
I hope, at least I get a lot of feedback, and I was looking at the end of term feedback just earlier today, and it tends to be that real interaction, not just practice, is exciting and fulfilling and fun, and mistakes are fun, and differences are fun, and just that kind of enabling. They're not wonderful at English, but I think that they make a big step in thinking, I can be who I am, or I can be someone else, in English, and my job is to help equip them and help give them that confidence. And to me, the biggest part of the confidence is, it was last year, one student said, it's easy for me to talk English in our class because all my classmates are kind and friendly. And so there's no judgment there. And you realize that so many students, we're at a middle ranking university, English department, which means that probably more than half the students in the class have a complex. Probably all of them have a complex. I've hardly spoken English before. I'm lucky to be in this university. I should be at a better university, but I failed and I ended up here. So they've got these different complexes, and they've got insecurities, they're introverts. So you've got all these things that we felt as well. So it's not like, I don't usually like the word empathize. To me, it feels like you're claiming, I understand exactly how that person feels, and I don't. But I think that, we've been through these things ourselves. We hesitate in Japanese. I say you have to just make mistakes to survive.
Yeah.
And that's part of what and so even about 1 month into class, there were students talking in groups. One student said something, and in another group, suddenly the students laughed, and he turned around like he'd been hit. He went, like someone's laughing at my English.
Right.
I said, no, it's okay. They're laughing at something else. But I realized that was still there, and that we were busy making an environment where you can just feel comfortable talking together. So that's why I said, fostering relationships. I think maybe the majority of the time of the first 2 months is working towards that, whether it's pair work or small group work or or rotating where you have compliments and responding with a story about the, I like your shirt. Oh, actually, it's from Book Off. Really? Wow. You get nasty things from Book Off. Oh, you too. Oh, whatever. And so that they get to talk to everyone. They don't make a clique, and they're comfortable doing that. So that the more they're capable, the more they contribute, the more. And Tanya
McCandy?
Yep. She put something on Facebook, which was something like, maybe I could find it if it's okay.
Sure. Well, while you're looking for that, let me remind everyone that you're all quite welcome to raise your hands and alert me that you'd like to ask Jim a question. I'll be opening up the microphone soon. Just a couple more questions that I wanted to ask Jim. Do you have, like, for example, you gave us just a couple of examples right there, right now, but do you have in mind, like, I really want to hit this particular thing that I always do with every classes to foster relationships that's not necessarily in the textbook? Do you have, in my mind, I have a list of things that I want to tell them about fluency that is actually very similar to some of the things that you're talking about in terms of their overall effect on their attitude towards how and what they learn. Is there a specific list of things that you say, well, I really want to make sure they understand, like, for example, how to sit next to each other, how to negotiate the sharing of, writing utensils and paper and stuff like that. Is there anything else that you think that is a must be done kind of thing in all of your classes?
I don't know whether there's I do lots of things, but it's, for example, how to, because they need to get to know each other. They need self-disclosure, but they don't need invasive questioning. And I think some textbooks make that mistake. They just what's your name? How old are you? Where are you from? And I think that is not about self-disclosure. That's interrogation.
Yes.
And maybe that doesn't help developing a good relationship. So instead of that, I introduced, could you tell us something about? And I found that activity was on a photocopyable resource originally. Now it's on I put it on a word wall roulette thing. And it's also on a board game, which I can hand out on paper now in the classroom. And so they say, could you tell us about your family, something about your family? And then you choose to disclose what you want to.
Right.
You don't need to say, actually, my brother's been married and divorced 5 times, because you select what you're comfortable to share with the people you're talking with.
That would definitely be fuel for a higher level conversation, though, if that actually.
Yeah, that's right. And we have, so when it comes to, for example, this time of the year, in fact, last week, the students were sharing embarrassing stories. So mistakes they've made in their life, like going into the women's restroom by mistake, or
did that the other day, actually.
Yeah, good. No, not good.
I thought I'd reveal that about
the other day.
myself.
I did a Pansy conference.
Put that on the table. Oh, yeah.
I was, and I went in as a woman. She said, "There's a sign there." Sorry. So at least I could share that with them.
Okay, John Carl, your turn. What's your most? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just going to make you tell your most embarrassing moment. No, I'll keep going, Jim. Yeah.
Often it's when they're little, they've gone shopping and they find they're holding someone else's mum's hand, so they're kind of sharing stories. A lot of them for when they're little or when they're at school, and they went into the wrong classroom in elementary school and everyone laughed. But when they share these stories, you should just hear it's like groups of 3 or 4, and there's so much laughter in the classroom. And it's so, and one student said something really nice. She said something like, well, something about the embarrassing stories are liberating. It turns something into laughter. And she said, and when we speak English, there are plenty of embarrassing incidents. And I hope one day we can turn these into laughter too. So she was, and so maybe if I could come back to what I was, what you
Tanya,
wanted
to show, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I could share it if you want, or she just,
yes, please.
She was quite, oh, okay, I'll do that. Just a moment. Here we are.
While you're doing that, I've got an interesting comment from Jocelyn. The choice is so liberating.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you are. And yeah, and freedom, realizing there's freedom to choose. Yeah, if the choices are not available options, then they're kind of like, well, in another world, but you want it to be in this world, in this classroom. Anyway, so this is what Tanya shared. The best classroom management strategy is to like your students. It's not a feeling, it's a choice. So that I think starting with that, choosing to see the best in them. So these are not stupid, know-nothing 18-year-olds. They're 18-year-olds with experience. They have much more pragmatic competence in Japanese than I'll ever have. And they have opinions, and that's Amy Fast, who's, and I added to that, and then to that liking soon enough is added respect as the students share who they are, how they feel, what they notice, and what they create. That our kind of positive attitude towards them and enabling means that they can show more of themselves. So that like those kind of observations, there's so many observations, I think, wow, thank you for sharing that, because I don't know how your side of the classroom.
I've made it now possible for everyone to unmute themselves. So I had a moment notice you could. I would, however, appreciate it, and I think it would be easier for Jim to answer these questions in the order that they're asked. So if you could still raise your hand using the raise hand button and then unmute yourself, I think that would be most appreciated. Jim, you were one of the most helpful, I thought, members of OTJ in terms of like giving your experience through 2020 and giving your perspective on things as everyone else was, everyone was trying to sort of swim through those panicky moments back early in the pandemic. But you were also one of the first people I noticed who quite publicly, verbally said, oh, I'm so glad to be back face to face in early 2021. And I think listening to you now, it's kind of, or maybe I'm assuming too much, but please tell me where I'm wrong. I'm wrong often. I'm used to it. Don't worry about that. It might be because so much of pragmatics requires that there's kind of this face-to-face, three-dimensional sort of presence in front of you to really appreciate all the nuances of all the facial tics that Curtis Hart Kelly always talks about is important to real relationships and appeasing the social brain. And how did you find that your teaching was either hampered or evolved through your experience of online teaching? And how do you feel about it now that you went from 2021, where you went right back into the classroom, felt relieved, then maybe with Delta got shot back into online, now maybe got back into face-to-face? How did that whole experience work for you?
First, I think my contribution to OTJ was usually saying, help, help, I don't know what to do. And my experience was, oh, here's a YouTube thing that explains how to use Flipgrid. And here's one in Japanese for your students. And I was thinking, oh, I love you. We are a community. I mean, I really felt that, and I still do feel that. And in saying that, I've kind of forgotten your question. But yeah, but what happened was that
okay, everyone, here's a teachable moment. How do we help Jim remember his question? No.
Yeah, 2.5 years ago, when we started the year online, it was not hell, but it was really hard. And I think it wasn't so much that the pragmatics isn't available on screen, it's that there wasn't a relationship. And everything I do depends on being able to share, and which is why, for example, I switched the end of class feedback to one shared online doc, so that could be a way that they would all be, they could copy each other's comments if they want. They could take their time. It wasn't a pressured look at my English, but it was the kind of being public with your English. So that was one thing I did and I've kept with. Another thing was an activity of sharing your favorite song. I can show that if you like, because that was the kind of thing we need to make relationships somehow. Can I show that if it's?
Sure. Would you like to answer John's question first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't see it, but maybe I.
Okay, sure. Why don't
I'm
you
not looking at the chat.
why don't you hunt that down, and John can get ready with asking his question. John,
Yeah,
why
sure.
don't you
Go ahead.
open up your mic and ask your question?
Well, it's kind of unrelated. So, Jim, are you ready with that slide?
Which the one I was going to show?
Yeah.
Yeah, the music thing.
Well, yeah. It's well, did you want to say something first? Go ahead.
Okay.
It can wait.
Everyone's
might be-
deferring.
Might be a bit unrelated. This was when I first saw this announced on OTJ. I asked the question in one of the chats. I'll just read it. If you'll address how Japanese societal norms influence how you bring students together, because you're teaching in Hiroshima, right? Or
That's right. Yeah.
and mostly Japanese students.
Yeah.
And it's in the Japanese culture, but you're teaching English language, obviously. So Japanese culture tends to be shyer than Western culture. The students more group oriented. And so I wonder if you take that into account when you're obviously you must in some way, if you use that to bring the students together, Japanese culture, but through English.
Yeah, I think that yeah, you're right. It is a bit different, and probably, but on the other hand, I think probably Britain is closer to Japan in that respect. People are less used to being sociable, open, expressive, and so I have that background myself, and I think that helps. And Heather McCulloch gave a really great presentation on introverted students and how to help at Hiroshima Shudo University, and that kind of told me, well, one thing is, she said one thing is, don't worry if you have an extrovert student and an introvert student together in a pair, because the extrovert student can talk as much as they like and the other one will be happy listening. So if you don't worry too much about that type of balance. On the other hand, introverted students prefer smaller groups, so 2 or 3 rather than 6 or 7. So thanks to her, I've always kept that in mind. So typically it's 2, 3, sometimes 4 in a group. And what Jocelyn picked up, the idea of choice is that, I was a fairly shy person, and I still am in a way. But I'm talking here on a public place. And so I know that there's choice and there's development. And I know that they don't want to be as shy as they are. And I know that most of them, and they want to be able to, learning how to talk to the person next to you is a kind of life skill that we more introverted people are happy to learn. And I don't think it's really so much stuck in a kind of national identity. I mean, because as I said, you can look at Osaka and say, oh, they're more sociable than we are. And we can choose to be more like Osaka than Hiroshima.
Right. Well, I teach in Osaka mostly. So
there we are.
Maybe easier time getting students to talk, or it's actually sometimes hard to get them to stop talking.
No, well, there we are. There, it's the Italy of Japan. Yeah.
But one thing I did find that helps. Sometimes you get like a very silent room, right? You'll ask the question. There's no reaction. There's a complete silence, or it's hard to get students to start talking, initiate talking when you say, "All right, time for your conversations," and you get them to go going. One thing that I did find useful was just having some like cafe music in the background.
Oh, okay.
And I usually play that, and that's kind of a signal for them. Okay, it's time to you can start talking, and they're not so self-conscious about being the first people to open their mouths because they've got this kind of background. Yeah, it's like an ambiance or cafe, like they're in Starbucks or something. So they're not so.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I'm too busy managing bits of paper and desks and classes to reach for the music player, but it sounds like a good thing to do. And I do things like, you know, that kind of, could you tell us something about activity? So that they've got that as a, I mean, it's a game thing, which means that, but then they can randomly choose what questions they ask. And whenever I am introducing an activity, I model, I say, and as for eliciting questions or comments, the first textbook I used at university was First Impact, and the teacher's book said something like, if you want students to answer questions, ask the whole class to stand up. When they answer a question or make a suggestion, they sit down. And I do that and say just in pairs, so that answer a question, you and your partner can sit down. And if someone does, I say thank you to your partner. So that even that has a kind of relationship kind of building facet to it, which means that no one likes to stand up. Everyone's motivated to ask a question. And so suddenly you've got a sea of hands going like this. And that for me was a kind of wonderful thing to discover when I started teaching at university and thinking, how do you deal with this question, no response? You say, stand up, I'll ask a question. There are many answers possible. Raise your hand.
Jim, did you want to show that slide? I'll do
we that.
We have another question from Jocelyn and a couple of comments, but I don't know which order you want to go in.
Okay, shall I just show it before I
go ahead? Yeah.
Okay. Just need to work out where it is. It's probably.
And Jocelyn, did you want to ask that? Do you want me to ask that for you? Did you want to open up your microphone a little bit later? Well, if you want to open up your microphone, just that'll give me the best hint that you want to ask it yourself. There you go. Yeah, now I know what to do. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, here's a kind of anonymized version of. So this is the way I was to make relationships among students who wouldn't turn on their cameras in the first semester of online teaching. And so I'd introduce a song, that kind of Tokyo version of Pharrell Williams' Happy, and I'd play it and I'd show this, like why I like the song, and then I'd show sample comments from friends of mine that I made up, well, half made up.
Yeah.
And each person would give a comment, and then I would respond to that. I like this song too. Do you want to dance? Yes, but not with you. Ha ha. And then every student would also respond to me. And their homework would be outside class. They do the same thing. They post a song, they post the YouTube link, they explain why they like it, and everyone responds to everyone's song. So they don't know each other. They're still afraid to turn on the computers, but they're interacting a lot, and it's all appreciative. I think if you were doing this in Britain, there would be too many like, oh, you like ABBA? I mean, it would not work. People have too much identity in their cool music. But I think that Japanese students are more open and accepting in that way, and it has worked well. And so that was 2.5 years ago. Last year, as you mentioned, we went, we were face-to-face for a month, and then we went online, and then we were face-to-face again. So we were online for 1 month, and still I was getting the end of class feedback, and the students were saying it was fun in the classroom and it's fun online, because they'd made those relationships. We have 2 classes a week, so that first month was 8 classes together, intensive relationship building, so that when we went online and they were in breakout rooms or whatever they were doing, they would be happy to turn their cameras on and talk together and do whatever we were doing. And of course, they were happy to be back in the classroom, but they were, I think it's the relationship more than the pragmatics that is the kind of enabler for comfortable conversations. And they go together, but when it comes to being online, I think that's what made it so desperately sad 2.5 years ago, and so much better 1 year later when they'd made friends before they had to go online.
Right.
Sorry, Jocelyn, should we?
I don't know if that answered your question, Jocelyn, but
A
Did
little bit.
students respond to your responses? No, we just had a kind of three-way thing.
Okay.
And then they were so busy anyway, because they had, maybe 16 classmates who would be commenting on their song, and they would have to listen to their 16 classmates' songs and comment on those. And so, yeah, I mean, each one, is kind of like a seed for a conversation. And that, you're right, you could just take that and say, okay, just continue, keep talking. You could take that to the classroom. I'm sure that would be a really nice thing to do.
Yeah, I was also curious, the way you set this up, it looks like maybe each day you have a different Google Docs. So I wondered if they could read your feedback, because after class they might close the Google Doc and never see it again. Whereas if you had like one doc and then you added all of your class contents to the same doc, they might go back and forth. Because what I did this semester is I had students use notebooks, and all of their contents were in the notebooks, and I gave feedback after every single class. In the past, I would give it on a sheet, and the sheet would disappear maybe, or I might not see it again. I wouldn't know necessarily if students even read it, but this semester, I was collecting the notebooks and I could see, oh, they actually sometimes responded to the feedback I gave, and I was so pleased. I was like, okay, yeah, I asked this question because I wanted you to reflect on that, but I didn't know or think you might respond. But yeah, they were engaged, and I could see at the beginning of class they would always like check, okay, what comments did she give me? And I was really happy. I was like, wow, okay, this feedback is actually meaningful, because sometimes you don't know if there's going to be any interest or uptake. So yeah.
So do my student, I usually send them an email as the next class is approaching, and including the link to that previous class's feedback that I responded to. I can show an example of, again, an anonymized one if people would like to see.
Sure. A couple of quick comments while you're working on that. Sure. From the Facebook live stream. You have some big fans in Adam Jenkins and Christian Perry, who said that,
well,
wow,
thank you.
I feel empowered just listening to him, from Adam. And from Christian Perry says, I wish Jim was my teacher.
Well, I wish we were in class together, Peza. Yeah.
There you go. And just one more comment from C.A. Eddington, and she just says, let me be the voice of the minority as a person who finds music, when played even in a cafe like Starbucks, so not necessarily a language learning environment, but music played over what would be a conversation is distracting. So there are students that might not react as we predict, although, the majority of kids probably would find playing music something, kind of fun, that there is a minority out there that might not react in the same way. On the other hand, she says, that said, a song used as a conversation starter is a great idea.
Yeah. My only reason for not doing it is that I've got too many other things on my mind. I think I need to get this sorted, but it sounds like John's suggestion is something I would try, but it's worth remembering, that some people might feel it's more noise or distracting noise when they're speaking a foreign language and trying to concentrate. So here's an example of the kind of student comments and feedback. This morning I overslept, so my breakfast was gummies. This person bought me some sweets yesterday for my birthday. Gummies are one of them. I didn't expect to eat in this situation. Thanks very much. I'm glad I wasn't late. That sounds like a perfect breakfast, well, perfect once a year. And so, I played 2 games with my classmates. It was very fun. I wanted to do roulette again. And the games, in fact, is non-stop speaking. Could you tell us something about or whatever? And so they think these are games, but really it's non-stop speaking with Aizuchi in return, and that's kind of most of what we do in class, I think. And you did ask about whether we have a text. We do have a textbook, but we have one textbook that could be finished in one term, 15 classes, but it's stretched over the year, which means we have very light textbook content. So it's maybe 25% textbook content is, and so it doesn't dominate, and we use it as a resource more than anything. So we can do other things.
Are you privy, Jim, to writing your own curricula? Do you have instructions from your administration to hit these specific targets in your classes, or you're basically your own boss in your classroom when it comes to that?
Well, I'm the coordinator for my side of these classes, and so in consultation with the other teachers, we make the curriculum, make this course description. But I don't think the students look at it that much, and we tend not to look at it that much. Until a student comes to me and said, I thought we were having a vocabulary test at the end of this course. I said, oh, sorry, I forgot.
Yep.
But we, there is a curriculum, but it's not that strict. And I think
I have a quick question before we go to a very
sure.
interesting question by Jenny Crittenden. That system of aliases that we're seeing there, M4, F1, F6, whatever, is that something that you use for all the students to protect their identities from each other, or is that something that you threw down here so that then we don't see their names here in this public program?
No, they have their names. I want it to be a kind of shared open space, so they see each other's names and each other's comments, and they tell me that, sometimes students last year that they met here and they would spend an hour typing to each other, or they would copy and paste each other's messages and mess them up. And so there's a bit of freedom there, but no, it's kind of open with their names. And I just took off the names for this.
Got it. Okay. Jenny, did you want to open up your microphone and or your camera to ask your question, or would you like to just read it out to Jim? Bimyo. Okay, here we go. Here we go.
Okay, I'm looking at it too.
Okay, and I'll read it out to the other people and for the sake of the recording. Students at the secondary level have often had choice in their class tasks taken away from them. So it is incredibly difficult to put it into the English classes, especially when they are only one time a week for 50 minutes, because they don't really know what to do with it. They spend an eternity just trying to understand that they get to choose from only a couple of things. Free, open-ended things have a tendency to be met with dead silence, but when examples are given, those are often copied directly, as that is what they are used to doing in other classes because they see it as in the notes, see it as the notes. Thoughts on encouraging this at these younger levels, Jim?
Yeah, I don't know. I have 2 classes of 90 minutes a week, so it's a real luxury in that respect. But I think that asking students what do they want to do next term, and doing my best to include what they suggest. For example, some students said, can we do another class where we're outside the whole class? There are some tables in a terrace, and so, or can we do that roulette game again where we're talking a lot? I say, yeah, of course we can. So, and choices of
how to get,
for example, yeah. I was thinking like, for example, especially at lower levels, instead of just saying, how are you? Fine, thank you, I'm you. They can say, yeah, I'm good, thanks, or I'm not so good, or I'm feeling hungry, I'm tired. I suppose that's the type of thing. But I think, yeah, if we offer a choice, maybe we have to also offer a couple of empty spaces where other things are possible. But I think even that type of greeting is a fairly complex thing that I have American friends who I'm passing in the corridor and they say, hi, how are you doing? I think, do you want to know? And I realized that maybe for Americans, it's more of a kind of fixed greeting. while in Britain, we'd probably only ask that question if we were sitting down together, in which case you'd be wanting more than fine, thank you. And so the whole, and I'm starving or whatever, and so the choice is available. But in a way, to me, that maybe doesn't matter. We're not wanting everyone to see that American English or British English or Australian English norms are what they're aiming for. They want to be themselves. And if they have a Japanese or Korean or whatever flavor to who they are, that's not a bad thing. That's who they are. And as long as, and you know, especially say, for example, if Japanese students are talking with Korean students, probably that more self-deprecation, that more hesitation maybe mean that they'll communicate better than if they were trying to be American. So the kind of choice thing, I think that choices that they can bring themselves and are often a good thing.
I want to encourage.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
but it's
okay.
kind of endless. Each of these issues is, you don't want to say, you know, this is how to communicate in English, but then there are, you know, there are many things to each of these issues.
Want to encourage everyone to actually, you know, turn this into a bit more of a conversation. Any time that you have specifically a question or a comment, I still encourage you to raise your hand if you can. But if you open up your microphones, that might be helpful too. Chiyuki had a good maybe suggestion for Jenny that she mentioned in the chat. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that anymore, Chiyuki. If you do, just come over here where the microphone is running. No? Yes? Okay. Well, she went from her room to suddenly
magic.
my room. Well, that's magic.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah. So what
you can do with technology nowadays.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you want to say about how you handle choices for young
Well,
learners?
for the younger learners, I did the negotiated syllabus with the younger learners, with the elementary school kids. And actually negotiate a syllabus is like they will choose what they want to do in a way. So having them participated in a course design was kind of like, how can we do, especially in the Japanese culture, we don't have any choice. Yeah. In primary schools and so much, we didn't really get to say anything. So they are more comfortable with the teacher says, okay, what do you want me to say? Like, what kind of fruits do you like? Yeah, but then how about, can they do it? That was my question. And I did that from 2 choices, then 3, and I get 4 and 5. But the choices of the questions or activities are more and more. Then I did the 3 months. Then at the end of the semester, they started saying, oh, I got to say. That was a kind of a new concept. So I would do that with the younger learners, like junior high school students as well. If we give a little bit of freedom, then probably they're going to get to expand that freedom a little bit more. Okay, that's that.
I can follow on that. Sorry, I don't actually have a camera.
But
yeah, it's me. Sorry. But I guess the thing I'm sort of thinking about is how to deal with the true lack of time. So when it comes to choices, you know, I get that the best way to get them better at it is to just keep doing it. But, you know, I see them once a week for 50 minutes. And so keep doing it, but have 25 of those minutes where they haven't made a decision and then ask them to do it for homework feels like punishment rather than encouragement. So I'm looking to see if anyone has any thoughts on strategies or tips to get them to see that, you know, choice isn't bad and choice isn't scary, and it really doesn't matter what you choose if it's something that you can talk about or write about or whatever the situation might be. Many times I've actually had students who spend the entire time without ever making a choice, and I have to sit with them one-on-one to get them to write something. And I have 40 kids in each class, so that's not exactly an ideal situation. Drawing things out of a hat.
Jocelyn, did you want to open up your mic?
This just popped, into my mind. Okay, why not have a bunch of pictures or a bunch of words in a box in a hat? They can, if they're stuck, then they can just choose one. If they don't like that one, try another one, and then maybe some other idea could come to their minds. I don't know. There might be a better idea.
No, it's good.
I think it takes only a few minutes to pick it up and then choose, and I don't like it, put it back.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we have done that kind of thing before. So mostly just sort of pointing out that at the secondary level, these kinds of things do become bigger and bigger problems, where as much as we want to use choice and encourage choice, it gets really, really difficult when we're so restricted in so many ways.
Have a few points from. Bye. Okay, and then of course, hi. We have a few points from Bricklin Zeph, who mentions a few things. Brick, I don't know if you want to just, you got a wealth of information. I want to open up your microphone and just share them all with us. That'd be fun. And Charles, good to see you. Cool without the beard, man. I shaved my stash too. So, Brick, no. Brick is not going to open his microphone, but I will.
Okay. Sorry about that.
There you go, bud.
I'm on my phone. I was downstairs with the family.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, those are just. I mean, no, I'm listening. I'm a pragmatics guy myself with Jim, and so I'm always in support of the pragmatic stuff. And then for our curriculum, we added functions that we teach, and we assess by role play performance assessment, which is good and bad, but it at least gets them in their head and get them to have an exchange, and they work on it that way. Yeah, that's all. That's how we put it into the curriculum, through using role plays and a performance assessment.
Just for the sake of the recording, Brick, did you want to make a comment on that thing that you called a micro expression or a micro greeting?
The micro greeting, yes. Actually, I published on that, coining that word. But yeah, the idea of the micro greeting, because I noticed, I had the experience a number of times where I don't know for Americans, if there are any other Americans on this, that you might see, another person on the road you don't even know, and you give the head nod, and it serves as a greeting. I think Brits do it to some extent as well, an acknowledgement, and basically it's a full greeting, but it's the most micro point, and it serves, like when you get on an elevator sometimes you might give a micro greeting, which is the smallest form of a greeting. It can either be a brief word or in that form. That's all.
Okay, there you go. Every time I do what I think Brick was referring to as a micro greeting, where you do this upward head nod, I feel like saying "sup, sup." Let's see who else.
That reminds me, Jose.
Go.
I have a friend who spent a few years in Greece, and in Greece, kind of yes is. And then she went back to the UK, and her mum was talking to her, and she kept going, and her mother was getting more and more angry. It was a kind of, that is not a way to respond. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No. I have nothing here to say that needs to be heard before anything you have to say, Jim.
Okay, I'll say something else then. Could I just share the screen one more time?
Certainly,
just to
sir.
Show,
at your leisure.
I realize that in a way I don't have such a principled list of things I have to cover, because in a way if we have a class and we like each other, we want to enjoy the class. And so bringing enjoyable activities, and these are two end of term feedbacks from a couple of days ago from two different students. And the kind of English is a bit, interesting in places, but all the lessons are fun, and mysteriously, I couldn't help but want to go there one day. One of my favorite activities was a class where everyone talked about their embarrassing stories. I laughed a lot that day. I hope that this class will continue to have more fun activities. I look forward to working with you. I like that. I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, sure.
Like, thank
Somebody
you,
got that from a
co-teacher.
textbook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the next one is this one loves Manchester City, and he picks up a lot of British English from there. There are many opportunities to use English in our conversations, so I was so excited, and that's a massive thing for me. I really like talking in English to people, so I could enjoy taking this class, and I always look forward to coming class days. And so that kind of talking with classmates is a really fun thing. The fact that they feel that they do that, and we do that every class, and maybe might be half of a class period in total. So 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, something. And so, and even if they're working with the textbook, they'll work in pairs and they'll work out the answers together. It's not a test or anything.
Speaking of tests, oh,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Speaking of tests, and I wanted to ask about assessment, because I think one of the questions that I get from people when I show what I show, my teaching method is how or what calculation do you do at the beginning of the class, or where'd he go? At the beginning of the class, or I'm assuming you can still hear me.
I can hear you, sorry.
Oh, good, okay.
So I just realized the battery was running down, so.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah. What calculations do you do before the class or during, when you realize, wow, we had such great fun in that class, but we didn't cover as much of the textbook. So what do you do in terms of assessment, or what do you do in terms of like writing your tests when it comes to, you obviously have a very, I don't want to say free flow, that almost sounds derogatory, but very in the moment kind of style. Do you have any particular formula to creating an assessment, or how do you create your assessment when you think about, well, we did this and this and this and this in class, but we didn't get to these chapters? Well, what do you do for that at the end of the semester?
Well, I ask the students what should be in the test, and some of them will say, oh, the vocabulary in the units we covered, and I say, okay, we'll do that. And some will say, can we have no silence conversation? I said, how long should the conversation be? And some said 3 minutes, some said 4 minutes, which is fairly long. And I said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. So it's 3.5 minutes. And it's not that easy. Jerry Talandis has a lot of good guidance about how to assess speaking, that type of speaking activity. But that, if I didn't have that as part of the assessment, I wouldn't be doing them justice, and it wouldn't be a reflection of what we do in class. But also, something like in fact, we have 2 terms. We have first 2 months of 1 term, then we have term 2, because we have 2 classes a week. And from term 2, I said, every end of class feedback is worth 3 points. If you do it, you get 1 point. If it's not late, you get 1 point. If you write more than 50 words, it's 1 point. And some of them put 114 words. So they were looking for a bonus point. But so there's already quite a lot. That's a lot of the writing they do is in that end of class feedback. And it's more, you ask for more and they give more. And they're more thoughtful and more reflective, because they can't say it was fun. They have to say, this is useful, or this is how I did it, or what. They have to bring more of themselves, which is, I'm really glad. And that too took me 30 years to realize that ask for more and they'll give more. Yeah.
And it sort of follows along the theme that Jocelyn said earlier about choice. What do you want to be tested on? And at that point, do you find they're actually, to relate to Jenny's earlier point before, that when you say, well, what do you want the test to be on? That's kind of like a shocking question if you think about it in terms of students who have not gone through your class. Do you find at that point that because you've sort of treated them in the way that you always have through the past 15 weeks that they're used to it. They go, okay, well, now that I have a choice, let me take advantage of it. Or they go, you mean I have a choice even in the test? Or how do you feel that they react when you ask them a question like that?
Typically, if I'm going to ask for that type of thing, I'll ask them to discuss it in pairs or threes so that they'll think about it and then they can report from their group. They're much less vulnerable in that respect and more productive. But I think they got used to it, you know, from day one, before the class bell went, they realized it was a different place. And the goal is to make an enjoyable place where they can communicate a lot, where they can make friends. And we're doing it in English. And it's going to make their English better. We have time for extensive reading in class as well. But the goal is that we're doing lots of things that we're not doing. They've spent 80 years studying English. We want to be using English. And they really appreciate the opportunity to talk together, to make friends. And it's really, I go to class expecting to enjoy it, and I think that they feel the same way, that, you know, what can we do today? It's not unprepared, but it's I'm always thinking, you know, what can we do? We'll be doing skits, and just about 2 weeks ago, one student found a ring on his desk, a little gold-looking ring. I said, and I started telling the story. I said, Sho picked up the ring, thought, oh, maybe I should take it to the student affairs office. And as he went there, he thought, oh, just see if it fits on my finger. He slipped it on, but it wouldn't come off.
Now, where'd I go? I knew
He got to the student affairs office and they said, well, I think you'll have to go to the hospital. And he goes there and the doctor says, well, we've got a choice. It's either we cut the ring or we cut your finger. And then he says, oh, it's okay, I'm joking. But then the nurse says, hey, wait a minute, that's my daughter's ring. What are you doing with my daughter's ring? You can't cut that. And I said, here, next semester, next term, you're going to each bring a story. You're going to share them with other groups. They're going to turn those into a skit. And then you're going to perform them. I thought, oh, and one student said, oh, I'm really looking forward to that already. And so if you have a class that's kind of happy with new things, then I think they're looking for new opportunities. Sorry, you can see I can keep talking for too long about these things.
Like I said, this is why you're here, so don't apologize about that. Comment from Chiyuki that she says, with the rapport that Jim can build, she says she can imagine that students are really comfortable to participate in class activities. Charles, did you want to bring your question in yourself?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Jim, do you, when you ask them to talk about what they would like to have in their final evaluation, do you, or maybe not final evaluation, I don't like that word, the last class evaluation or whatever, do you give them some examples of what previous classes have chosen, or you just say, use your imagination, or how do you?
Well, I say what's going to be there already. I said, for example, it's 15% for the extensive reading.
I see.
And there's the end of class feedback.
Right.
And what other things do you think should be there?
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Jim, it's now 11:30. As I would have predicted, this was a fascinating talk and it went really quickly. But did you did you have any other things that you wanted to show us before you go? I don't know if you covered all your bases there. It seemed like you had a lot of stuff that you wanted to talk about as well, too.
We'd love to see if there was anything. Just a minute.
Okay. And everybody else, we're probably going to be wrapping up within, a little while. It's your last chance to think about any comments or questions that you want to make. Anything that you want to say, even to the wider audience, or what you want to sort of propose as what you do that Jim does, is your last chance is coming up fast.
So there's some things related to kind of peace building, or so it's something like finding commonality. So I really don't like the activity find someone who. to me, it's like if you tried doing that at a party, you'd be the crazy person. Do you wear glasses? Oh, see you, bye. You write down the name. But if you can find something in common with each classmate, and you give like, maybe, could you tell me something about your family? Could you tell me something about how you get here? So they use that fairly open question. And then once they found something in common with each classmate, I don't want them to be making one or two good friends, just a clique. I want them to be happy that we change the classes every 3 weeks, the seating will change. And especially, I make a point of making male and female students sit together, because if I don't do it, they won't do it. And they're really happy to do it. I mean, it's not like, oh no, do I have to sit next to him or her? They're saying, oh, thank you for doing it because I'd like to, but I can't choose to sit next to her. It's too much of a kind of public statement if I do that. And so that seating and rotation is a big thing. So there's the commonality, the non-cliquiness, and the self-disclosure. I think those are big things that are kind of, because you're looking for them. It's not me who makes the atmosphere, it's that relationship. So my goal is to help them to reach the point where they really are happy talking with each other. And that's, my priority. I don't want to be, I have to model things, but I don't want to be the center of the class. I want them to be friends for life.
Brick mentioned that he has a rubric in an Excel file that he was very generously willing to share with everyone for how to assess role play performances. And he did share it in the chat, and I think a few people probably downloaded it. However, Brick, would it be all right for me to take that file and make it linkable to this actual event so that other people at OTJ would be able to download it? Would that be all right with you? Can you give me a thumbs up maybe, or just a quick sup in your micro greeting? In your
yeah, I've just saved it too. Thanks.
Okay, I'll wait on that, man. And if you can give me a response a little bit later, that would be really nice, unless he already did. Anyone else that wants to mention anything to Dr. Ronald? Nope. Okay, Jim, that was lovely as
thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us.
And I really wish we had been able to do it live. This was all supposed to be like a live kind of thing with the three of us, me and Chiyuki and Jim, and then we go out for okonomiyaki afterwards.
Let's do that.
Yes, I would like to do that because that would complete it. That was actually one of the biggest things that I wanted to do with you. I got to say, sorry, the conversation was important, but the okonomiyaki was going to be very important to me too. And I'm sure that I speak for everyone when I say thank you very much for the ideas and for the reinforcement of the idea that we have to sort of approach our students, as Chiyuki likes to say, in a very humanistic way, and see them not just as targets for the curriculum and for the administration to get more TOEIC test takers to succeed, to make their school look good, but to actually, as you said, make friends and experiences that will benefit them through their lives. Couple of interesting, just a lot of thank yous and stuff. And Yoko and Yoko says and things. And okay, Jim, or Yoko, would you like to open up your microphone and say this yourself, or shall I read it out for you? So new message here. Okay,
hi.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a bit too sick to talk a lot, but I just started taking this super flexible online course offered by Central Queensland University on social brain. And yeah, it's been wonderful. I highly recommend it to everyone who's interested.
Thanks,
and thank you
for coming today.
Jim and
thank you.
Thank you. Last chance, anyone? Nope. Okay. How to big wave to Jim? Jim, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jose. And thank you.
No, not at all. Please don't thank me. Please, I want to thank you. Okay, there we go. And stop the live stream. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Thanks very much for coming.
Take care. See you.
Okay. And I will be closing the room now. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye, Jim. Thanks again.
Bye. All right.